To fully understand the evolution of surrealism in cinema, we need to first understand what the heck surrealism is. The first definition of surrealism was coined by French writer and poet André Breton in 1924. This author of the Surrealist Manifesto describes surrealism as the juxtaposition of symbols, images, or actions to create a world outside of reality. These ideas were often inspired by dreams and nightmares, the idea of being human yet somehow inhuman, and creating an escape from reality. However, the seeds of surrealism were planted long before André Breton wrote his manifesto. Philosopher Karl Marx believed that the psyche had the power to reveal the contradictions in the everyday world. Sigmund Freud wrote about the theories of psychoanalysis of the unconscious mind. Freud's protege, Carl Jung, theorized that the human psyche is made up of three parts: the ego, or the unconscious mind, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. These iconic philosophers inspired the theory of epistemology, or how we come to understand the world. The answer to this phenomena was often debated by two polar sides, the rationalists and the empiricists. Rationalism is the belief that opinions and actions should be based on reason or knowledge. Empiricism, however, is the belief that all knowledge is derived from sense experience, or a place of surreality. The seeds of surrealism began to blossom as a result of World War I. Post-war surreal art flourished in the form of paintings, poetry, literature, and cinema. The early era was pioneered by Salvador Dali, Louis Buñuel, and Germain Dulac. These artists rejected logic, reason, and aestheticism of the modern capitalist society and instead expressed nonsense, irrationality, and anti-bourgeoisie protest in their work, creating a movement known as Dadaism. From this idea sprouted the first ever surrealist film, The Seashell and the Clergyman by Germain Dulac, in 1928. The premise was simple: a priest dreams of and desires a beautiful young woman. Because of its lack of ambiguity, people argue if it truly is a surrealist film, but I think the imagery speaks for itself and the time period in which it was created. Although Seashell and the Clergyman is credited as the first surrealist film, it's often overshadowed by the masterpiece from Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel, Un Chien Andalou, made shortly after. The film does not have a plot and uses dream logic to link together non-consecutive scenes. It features 17 minutes of bizarre images that appear to mean nothing, but, according to Dali, were inspired by his own personal unconscious dreams. Un Chien Andalou shows us that cinema isn't always about making sense. Sometimes it's about making us feel a certain way. Eventually, surrealism began to make its way into mainstream cinema. Salvador Dali emigrated to the United States and became an instant celebrity. Mainstream filmmakers sought out his expertise in the movement to add surrealism to their own films. In 1945, Alfred Hitchcock hired Dali to create a dream sequence for his film Spellbound. According to lead actress Ingrid Bergman, the original dream sequence was 20 minutes long. Only about 3 minutes of the sequence made it into the final cut. If you ask me, it seems like a waste of Salvador Dali's brilliance, but it was a huge step forward for the surrealism in Hollywood at the time. In the same year, Walt Disney hired Salvador Dali to storyboard a short film for him called Destino. The project was scrapped due to lack of funds. I know, pretty crazy to imagine, right? However, in 2003, it was actually put into production and went on to win an Academy Award. Did you notice anything familiar about that scene with the human hand? Entering the 1960s, surrealism began to take new forms in Europe. A great example is in the works of Federico Fellini. After the success of La Dolce Vita in 1960, Fellini was able to take much more creative liberties in his work. He was inspired by the theory of Carl Jung that by interpreting the dream state, we are naturally inclined to construct stories with archetypes. Here's the first 3 minutes of his masterpiece, 8½.
Avvocato, l'ho preso. Ehi! Giù! Vieni giù! Giù definitivamente.
David Lynch was heavily inspired by both Fellini and the French New Wave. His films often take the concept of Americana and Middle America and combine it with a dark, surreal aesthetic. Visuals are often described as Lynchian, meaning surreal and sinister images are juxtaposed with mundane, everyday environments to emphasize a dreamlike quality of mystery or menace. David Lynch's first feature film, Eraserhead, was the story of a man who is left to care for his grossly deformed child in a desolate industrial landscape. Lynch says this film was greatly influenced by his move from Montana to Philadelphia and his fear of becoming a father when his first wife was expecting. Eraserhead established Lynch as a respected auteur director, paving the way for many more surrealist masterpieces to come, such as The Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and Twin Peaks. David Lynch practices transcendental meditation, and I'll just let him explain it to you.
This is a donut. It is very sweet and very good. But if you'd never tasted a donut, you wouldn't really know how sweet and how good a donut is if you'd never had that experience. Transcendental meditation is like that. Transcendental meditation gives an experience much sweeter than the sweetness of this donut. It gives the experience of the sweetest nectar of life, pure bliss consciousness.
So it's no wonder he is able to so flawlessly enter his audience into a dreamlike world. David Lynch and Terry Gilliam paved the way for surrealism in modern-day cinema, such as cult classics like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Donnie Darko. One of the most evident examples is the film Being John Malkovich in 1999. This film played with the surrealist rabbit hole trope that we have seen time and time again. However, it attempts to explain this phenomena in a much more complex and intelligent way. You see, it plays with the idea of materialism, in which only the physical world exists, subject phenomena is part of the world, and consciousness is a product of the physical world, and idealism, in which only experience is subjective and everything is a construct of the subjective, or dualism, in which objective and subjective need to coexist in equal measure. Materialism and idealism are only partially correct. Yep, I'm a little confused too. The film is, nonetheless, bizarre and beautiful, transporting us into the mind of famous actor John Malkovich through the means of super meta writer Charlie Kaufman and director Spike Jonze. So, what is the point of surrealism? In my opinion, surrealism allows us to push towards the world of the unknown and forces us into the state of introspection. It allows artists, philosophers, and scientists to learn from each other collectively. Also, it's just really, really, really cool.